Okay, we'll call a meeting to order. Thank you all for coming. Our apologies that we're late, but the previous meeting ran a little bit late, thanks to the chair of that meeting. I do want to acknowledge our residents and visitors, for that matter, all of the people from Thailand. I don't get many opportunities to wear my tie, but today I'm wearing it because it's Thailand's New Year's, Songkran. So on behalf of Council, Happy New Year's to our dozens of residents of Thai descent. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Our first item this evening is the minutes of the public hearing held on Monday, March 30th. Recommendation to approve.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Reid, second by Councillor Asmundson. All in favour? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 2 is the minutes of the regular council meeting, also held on Monday, March 30th. The recommendation is to approve those minutes.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Marsden, second by Councillor O'Neill. All in favour? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 3 is minutes of the Sports Council meeting held on Wednesday, March 4th. Recommendation to receive those minutes.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Councillor Hodge, second by Councillor Towner. All in favour? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item of business arising out of that committee meeting concerns the Sports Council's 2015 work plan. The committee's recommendation is that their 2015 work plan be approved as attached.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Hodge, second by Councillor Towner. All in favour? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 4 is minutes of the Multiculturalism Advisory Committee meeting of Wednesday, March 18th. Recommendation to receive.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Asmundson, second by Councillor O'Neill. To receive, all in favour? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 4.4 concerns the Multiculturalism Advisory Committee's 2015 work plan. The committee's recommendation is that the Multiculturalism Advisory Committee's 2015 work plan be approved.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Asmundson, second by Councillor O'Neill. All in favour? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
And item 5 is minutes of the Riverview Lands Advisory Committee's meeting of Tuesday, March 24th. Recommendation to receive.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Hodge, second by Councillor Marsden. All in favour? Opposed? Okay. You're good? All in favour? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item of business arising out of that committee's meeting concerns the Riverview Lands Advisory Committee's 2015 work plan. The committee's recommendation is that their 2015 work plan be approved.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Councillor Hodge, second by Councillor Marsden. All in favour? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
First report of staff this evening concerns craft breweries, distilleries, and recent major changes in provincial liquor licensing regulations. Two-part recommendation from staff is that Council endorse option 2 as set out in the report before you as an approach for addressing this matter, and 2, that staff be authorized to draft proposed zoning bylaw amendments to accommodate craft breweries and distilleries in Coquitlam based upon option 2, and that staff report back on a recommended process for reviewing reviewing the city's current policy and a proposed stakeholder consultation program related to the draft zoning bylaw amendments.
It's odd that we would call it a draft zoning bylaw amendment. Sir, come on, it's beer. Moved by Councillor Reid, second by Councillor Marsden. All in favour?
I got questions.
Councillor Hodge.
So yeah, I've got a couple of questions on this one, and and generally, I support the concept that we want to bring business to the community. We want to allow craft breweries in the community. But I am concerned over a couple of things, and that is that over the past we've had a lot of discussions about food primary and liquor primary, and that many of the food primary are acting as liquor primary. And I have the concern that while we bring this into industrial zones, are we just creating future pubs? And particularly what we see has happened in Port Moody, 2 have now applied to to have lounges. And so I'm just wondering, in fact, because if this goes through, public doesn't have the same consultation that they do with liquor primary, because these would fall more along the rules of the food primary, such as distance to schools, parks, churches. So they would be exempt from that, would they? Or would we build that into the zoning? I mean, is it just an automatic, if you meet the zoning, you get it? Or do they come back to council to establish one of these just as a pub would come back?
Mr. McIntyre.
Your Worship, thank you, and good evening, Mayor and Council. I'll try to directly and as briefly answer Councillor Hodges' question, but there's a whole lot to this, I think, as Council can appreciate. Specifically for a craft brewery, and certainly the example of the ones that have been established in Port Moody, after the fact, yes, they've come back and they've applied for a lounge endorsement. A lounge endorsement is another form of liquor primary liquor license. So that type of liquor license would be referred to the City of Coquitlam under our existing policy. So it would be treated just as if any other liquor primary license referral to the City.
So if the one was established under the current proposal, any of these industrial zones, of which we have 3, they could set up in any location without coming to council because they would meet the zoning requirements.
Through the chair, yes and no. In the 3 industrial zones, a craft brewery or distillery, which we're going to lump those together, and I'd like to come back to that in a minute if I can, could be established in all 3 of the industrial zones, because to start with, it's a production, it's a processing operation. You're brewing beer or distilling liquor. Yeah. Where the difference is, where the deviation is, what's allowed in those zones, is if you want to then sell product, bottles of whatever you're distilling or cases of beer, or you want to serve visitors to consume on site. That's not permitted, because currently in the city's zoning bylaw there's some restrictions going back to 2003 that specifically preclude the sale of alcohol in industrial zones. So on one hand, you could have the production, you could produce, you could have a craft brewery or a craft distillery in those zones, but you couldn't be selling to customers on site, either to take away or to consume on site. So that's the challenge with that.
And so under this proposed change, would they be able to sell at any of those locations, or would they have to come to us to make a change on an individual case-by-case basis?
Well, what we're
sell what they produce, yes, yeah. But they could open up. That's the whole point of this, is the ability to have people come in, sample, have a drink, have something to eat. So that's the whole concept. Is that trying to see how many processes or where the public gets to weigh in on this?
Essentially, that's true. What we sense, there's an interest, and you know, let's be honest, there's an emerging business form out there that is into an area where our zoning bylaw is just not quite up to date. And I sense from council from the earlier discussions there was interested in accommodating that. So we've in this report, amongst a whole lot of information, we've laid out 3 options. The second option is the one we're recommending, and it would be essentially in certain recommended industrial zones. We come back with you with that information. Plus, I think we should maybe consider enabling this in some of the commercial zones that now have the liquor primary establishments. You know, it might make sense. But going hand in hand with that, and what we would propose is coming back with some very broad brush descriptions of what these zoning changes could be. We would also come back with a recommended consultation process, because we think consultation with the industry should start now at this stage. We went through the whole industrial review. There was no hint before that we were looking at opening up and allowing for craft breweries and lounge endorsements in those areas. So we haven't covered that base in our view. So that's what we'd be recommending. There be consultation on that point. Secondly, as well, and for those council members that recall the liquor licensing referral review policy that came forward about almost 2 years ago now, through that process, there was extensive consultation, and we still hear from those parties. And so I think, again, as a matter of fairness, we would be recommending that we would be consulting with them as well. So if in the end of the day, council was to consider and support changes to the zoning bylaw, and again, there would be a public hearing for that, I think what we'd be recommending down the line is that we would want to update our liquor licensing referral review policy, and that too would have, I would think, provisions for consultation and for feedback from those various parties.
So at this point, this would involve, as part two, that we would go out to consultation. Remember, we did this a year and a half ago or 2 years ago. We went out, we talked about 130 businesses, or at least gave them the opportunity. And what we heard from the pubs is that it's a tough business out there right now, that food primaries are starting to act, operate as pubs, that the lines between the designations is becoming blurred. Things are becoming more blurred as the provincial government moves to change regulations. I've raised, and other councillors have raised, the issue about liquor primaries within 300 meters of schools and parks, and yet food primaries can. Presumably this might be able to, because it operates more like a food primary. So to me, this opens up a lot of questions. So many I've asked, some I've asked tonight, but I've got a lot more. So I guess what I'm saying is that if we go ahead, we've got to have a real thorough discussion. As much as I want to have them here, I think this opens up a lot of concerns.
If I could, Your Worship, absolutely. If anything, in doing the research and the analysis and preparing this report, it's really opened our eyes to how much we didn't know before and how much we need to know in this process. And again, there is emerging business interest in this area, so I think we need to pay attention to. But what we need is to sort of rethink, a revisiting of how the zoning is set up to deal with these types of businesses, how our policies deal with that, how that's all going to interact and work with the ever-changing provincial regulations that almost weekly we're seeing different things coming out of the province on this. So our proposal, if council supports the recommendation, let us take it away. We're trying to make more sense of this. We come back with a report. We try to lay out some options, sort of show kind of the universe of the situation here, have a recommended approach to dealing with that, and along with a recommended consultation approach. So the first step will be back to council. Let's see where we might want to go, checking with council at that time, and if it needs some tweaking, so be it, and then we'd be out to consult on that approach.
Okay, good, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cirillo.
Yeah, mine was just to commend staff on being very prudent on this one, especially with all the changes that are coming through the provincial government. And the most recent one about craft breweries, about how them having to pay the taxes that apply to run the alcohol through the Liquor Control Board, even though they're not actually physically running it through the Liquor Control Board, and that may reduce the interest in craft breweries. So I'm just glad that you're being very cautious and very prudent on this one and not running full steam ahead, because it's a moving target right now. Thank you.
Councillor Rasmussen.
Well, thank you. Councillor Hodge has made some of the points that I'm going to continue in that vein. I'm looking at this, and I think, as you note in your report, we need to go out and do extensive consultation. When I looked at some of this, and I looked at the brew pubs, and even the report states they operate similar to a small pub, and I'm starting to say, well, why don't they operate under the same rules as a pub in the application process? I know they're brewing their stuff on sites, but what about a brew pub and classifying it as that? Because are they doing this because then their overhead and their costs can be less, and they're going to be a competitive advantage against other pubs? My questions also go around the lounge aspect of it. What is the size of a lounge? Is entertainment involved? It says that they can have the full kitchen if they want, or right now some are using food trucks to supply that food. But I got a lot of concerns about how this is going to fit into our industrial areas, how it's going to affect our businesses. There's a blurred line that's been going on for a number of years between food primary and pubs. Pubs are like restaurants now, and restaurants like pubs. There's a complete blurring of the lines right now. And is this going to create another advantageous for another group that isn't following all the same strict rules that both of them? You look at the pubs and how they serve and their complaints, that we're setting different levels of rules for different groups. And so I think your recommendation is right, but I think the biggest key here is to really go out and consult with all the industries that are involved and move on this. But I have a lot of concerns. Councillor Hodge mentioned moving forward. I want to hear from the public. I want to hear on that consultation. I don't want to create an uneven, unfair playing field for them. Brew pubs are a nice thing to have, but I don't know how much of an actual job generator they may be versus a regular pub that we have. Are we going to lose? Because pub business today is a very, very tough business. When we were younger, a pub wasn't easy to make money, but today it's a very, very challenging, difficult business to keep your profit margins on. So those are my comments, my ideas on regards to this, Mr. McIntyre.
Thank you. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. This is very complicated, and further to some of the things that Councillor Asmussen has said, my concern is these people that are opening these pubs really should not be allowed to have what we call full liquor primary lounge endorsements. I think there has to be some other misnomer for them because they are not full primary liquor things, and I have a problem with that because they don't operate under the same rules, and it's just wrong. But of all the things that you've given me, option 2 was the only one that I could offer business opportunities such as our competing cities offer. But the fact that they can come in and stay there and then they want a kitchen, come on, I mean, this is getting just a bit silly when you have to drive in a little mobile vending thing and sell hot dogs just so someone can sit there and drink the product. My biggest concern is the province has not yet completed all the changes they're doing in the liquor business. And I think our timing on this is really bad. We're sort of stepping into the middle of something that we don't have all the answers for. Yet I want to be there because I don't want to turn the business opportunity away. So the only thing I can do is endorse this at the moment, but I'd like to definitely work with the province and try to find some more apt ways of offering a lounge endorsement, but it's not really a lounge. So I think we have to work with that. And the other problem that's going to come back and bite us is that a few years ago there were licenses for sale all over British Columbia. So we have had certain people running all over BC, picking up little licenses in little counties and villages and wherever they could pick them up for next to nothing. And now the province has changed it so they can have the ability to move those licenses from those little villages anywhere in the Lower Mainland, anywhere in the province to be specific. That is really a big money-making scheme for those few who got in on it a few years ago. I think this, the whole liquor thing has to have a good analysis from the get-go. We don't have, it used to be a restaurant and a pub, and it's no longer that anymore. It's just one big open license. So I would suggest that by doing this, we might open it up to allow ourselves to entice some businesses, but I'm really more interested in working with the province to provide fairness.
Your Worship, if I could just to speak to a couple of the comments made by Councillor Reid, which are bang on. Council may recall when we prepared the earlier policy, there was a lot of consultation with provincial staff on that. And again, we went back, pardon the pun, to the well, again on this piece here, just to check with them where things are at, because it is changing just so, it's almost weekly. So we'll continue to monitor that and liaise with the province. One of our approach to this is, I think was embodied in the referral policy before, is to try to establish, work towards a level playing field, and that would be our interest in approaching it. Just on the lounge endorsement, I'm sorry if I wasn't maybe quite clear enough on that. My understanding is it's a lounge endorsement applies just to that craft brewery for the product they produce on site. So it doesn't open it up to the full range.
I understand that, but that's just the baby step into trying to open it up. Because, and I'm going to be totally against that.
Yeah, because with the craft brewery or craft distillery, there's certain restrictions that go with those licenses in terms of the amount that can be either consumed or sold. So the lounge endorsement is the way for them to work beyond those restrictions. Just the other thing, if I can as well, is not just the industrial zones. In the report, we point to a number of the commercial zones we think that may be appropriate for these types of businesses, and that's based in part, well, the reality we have in Coquitlam right now, where many of these similar liquor establishments are located, but also as well, because we've had some feedback, and I'm encouraged by this, we've had some feedback from prospective businesses in this area, a craft distillery represented through a business consultant, and they were very keen on a city center location, so like making it part of sort of the buzz of downtown Coquitlam, if you will. More recently, we had an inquiry around a craft cidery, and you'll note in the report there's a footnote there. We recognize it. We said, well, let's put that on hold because we haven't heard too much about it. But sure enough, someone comes forward and has contacted us, and we will be meeting with them to understand what their business interests are too. So we would be intending to treat that as a group: craft breweries, distilleries, cideries, perhaps winery, but we'd have further information for council on that. So I just wanted to provide that clarification for you.
May I ask a question, Your Worship, please, to staff to clarify something?
Sure.
Just operating hours.
Yeah, my understanding is now the way the craft breweries are set up, I think it's a 9 to 11 operating frame window they have. And obviously that's different from our liquor primary, liquor licensing referral policy.
So my question is then that we could have reduced hours as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Marsden.
Thank you. I'm going to support option number 2. I want to thank Mr. McIntyre for taking the time to meet with me and have reviewed the current zonings of C2, 4, 5, 7 that currently would enable these despite but then be prohibited from actually selling their product. So I think this is a good step in the right direction. The public houses have been seen as a sunset industry in the finance game for a number of years now. They've got a lot of challenges on them, and now we see with our craft breweries, it's a budding industry, and I think, and we heard around this council table that we need to be in the game, and so I think this particular bylaw enables us to get in the game, gives us the components to look deeper at our current rules. When we look across our region right now, or across our city, and we see some of our liquor primaries in areas that we're going to see redevelopment. And at this particular point in time, the rules that we have in place are going to prevent them from closing their doors, reopening someplace else while the land that they currently occupy is redeveloped. They just have to close up and lay everybody off. That's just not going to be viable. So I really like this fact that we're going to look deeper into the current liquor licensing application, the review policy. I think that's well overdue. And I think opening our doors and at least being open to looking at these opportunities, I think is really, really important. I've talked to a number of people in various parts of the city that have said they want this. And by example, we go up into Burke Mountain. Find me a spot in Burke Mountain that is not within 300 meters of a park. Well, forget schools or religious facilities. They really don't exist. So I think this is a great step in the right direction, and I'm glad the discussions with the consultants are going well in terms of actual interest in coming to Coquitlam already. So thank you very much. I'll be supporting this.
At some point we're probably going to look into the history of the radius rules that I suspect go back to a resistance to have private liquor stores come into Coquitlam, and therefore essentially a ban on anything that wasn't already there, because I don't think there's any place within Coquitlam that isn't within that limiting distance of a school, park, place of worship.
Thank you, Mike.
Take care. Okay, so the motion is?
Motion's been moved and seconded.
We're ready.
1 and 2.
All in favor? Opposed? After much debate, we carry unanimously.
Next item 7 is zoning amendment bylaw number 4527, which is to amend the industrial zones and further refinement to the CS1 service commercial and A3 agricultural and resource zones. Recommendations that council rescind first reading given to City of Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw number 4527. Give first reading to City of Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw 4527. and refer bylaw number 4527 to public hearing.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, second by Councillor Marsden. Councillor Askinson.
Through to Mr. McIntyre and staff, thank you for, my question was about the mini warehouses and your response to it. I still have concerns, even in response about including in all the CS1 zones. We don't have a lot of CS1 zone lands. We have very little industrial lands for job generations, and mini warehousing takes them up with very little jobs generated. And you look at some of our CS1s along the Barnett Highway. Do we want, single level storage places along the Barnett Highway? Is that what our future look for that area in different areas of the city? I would propose, this is going to have a public hearing in the future, like a minimum 2-story for storage buildings. I just have concerns about the limited amount of industrial land that we have, the needs that we have in our future projections for over 70,000 jobs to be in Coquitlam to meet our growth and targets. So that's the one area that I just have a bit of concern about. I'll approve this, I'll move this out for public hearing, but I'm still concerned about even the mini warehouse. I think there should be some restrictions on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks. My question is on page 3. We talk about removing minimum building setbacks for the rear lot line, interior side lot, wells or streams for industrial uses. And I guess what I just want to confirm is the intention of this is to freeze the current state of affairs on that site. But if they're not, just want to make sure that, it just freezes what's currently happening on site, not allowing something that isn't already going on that site.
Through your worship, yes, that is correct. What we are doing with those setbacks is those are the current provisions on those M4 zone properties along the Pipeline Road area. And so we're essentially continuing those same setback provisions for those type of industrial uses under the A3 zone, limited to those sites with those uses.
And because those are governed under the Mining Act and not city bylaws, there is no need for a setback along the stream? I think I heard that at some point, and I can't.
That is correct through the Mining Act, but the city still believes that there should be provisions related to such within our zoning bylaw. Should those mining provisions not apply to those properties at some point in the future?
Right. So what we're saying is they can still. So what this says to me is that there's no setback required for a stream.
There currently is a minimum setback, and that same minimum setback will continue under the new A3 zone provisions. So essentially,
it says we're removing the minimum setback.
No, there's no change from the current provisions of these uses on these properties under the M4 zoning. And so we're essentially transferring those very same setback provisions on these same properties under the A3 zone.
Take your word for it. Thank you.
Councillor Zirillo.
Okay, so I have a question on page 2. I just need some clarification on the A3 agricultural resource zone. So we did have an item that came to council a couple of months ago about the granite and the stone cutting, and I assume that's across the street from A3. Like, what is the zoning for that one now? The one across the street.
Mr. McIntyre, is that bedrock?
Your Worship, maybe just for staff's benefit, just to clarify through the Councillor Zirillo, are you referring to the lands across from the bedrock facility on Pipeline Road? Is that the?
I'm referring to the east side of the A3, the land that's zoned A3, the east side on Pipeline Road, what is the zoning for that one?
Connected to the river.
Yeah, this one.
You're done with the last schedule, right?
The last fold-out schedule,
But it doesn't
sorry,
show.
the second last one, page one of the last one.
So this is all we're dealing with, not this.
So what is that one being zoned?
We're not dealing with that in this bylaw.
So referring to the penultimate page,
Map 10 of 10.
map 9 of 10.
They both work.
Oh, sorry, on 10 of 10.
10 of 10?
10. Houses. This is bedrock here.
Through your worship, so the property directly across the street to the east is zoned RS2. There's 2 properties.
Right. So is there any thought that that will get an A3 zoning? Like, are we ever going to be at the point? I guess the reason I'm asking is because we know we have some caveats on that property across the street on the west side, or council requested some caveats. So I guess I'm just wondering if, like, I see in the A3 zone, it says we're now going to allow accessory retail, limited retail sale of asphalt, accessory washing, manufacturing of concrete products. So I'm just wondering if that same zoning at some point may apply across the street, where we had a lot of discussion from the community, and this council asked for some caveats to happen around sound and dust, and I'm just trying to anticipate that will there be a request to rezone across the street an A3 at some time, and then they're open to do the casting, the manufacturing, the washing, the selling.
Okay. Through your worship, I think I understand, Councillor, where you're coming from. So the land use designation for those properties that are zoned RS2 is suburban residential, which is RS2 is the corresponding zone to that land use designation. So the short answer would be if someone wanted to rezone to A3, they would also need to apply for an official community plan amendment to the resource or agricultural and resource designation as well.
So it's not out of the question for that to happen at some point?
Not out of the question, but it would require not only a rezoning, but an official community plan amendment. So yep.
Okay. And I guess, so then I would ask, and I mean, this is all very technical, so I'm only asking because I really want to understand. So if is manufacturing already going on in the A3 zone, or is this new?
What's already going on these properties, the properties in question are already zoned M4 along Pipeline Road. These properties are limited in terms of what they can do under the M4 zone, which is the manufacturing, concrete, batching, accessory uses call for accessory retail of concrete products and asphalt products. So what these amendments basically do is they transfer all those M4 uses that are currently located on these properties to the A3 zone, because the M4 zone will no longer be in existence.
Okay. So is the A3 zoning losing any privileges that the M4 had? I mean, I didn't read that in here, but is there any privileges that we should be aware of that are being lost?
No privileges are being lost, and these uses that are being added into the A3 zone are limited just to these sites that currently have the M4 zoning on it. So we're not broadening to include under the A3 zone concrete batch plants on any zone on any site that has an A3 zone on it. It's only these specific sites that currently have the M4 zoning on them.
And how many are there? Because I only saw one.
There are 6 sites.
Okay, I didn't see them on, did I see them on this map? I only saw one A3 turning to an A3 on these maps.
The sites are actually listed on Schedule A of the zoning bylaw amendment.
Okay.
So that's the actual A3 zoning, and the specific sites are listed by address and by property identification number.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Motion is first reading. All in favor? Opposed? We're going to a public hearing. Carried unanimously.
Next item, item 8, is zoning amendment bylaw number 4555 for a proposed subdivision at 1238 Rocklin Street. Staff recommendations that council give first reading to City of Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw number 4555 and that bylaw number 4555 be referred to public hearing.
Moved by Councillor Asmundson, seconded by Councillor Marsden. I'd like to comment here in that we're both not requiring any land to be dedicated as park, and we're taking some land dedicated as park, and we're also accepting 5% in lieu of dedicating any land as park. Yep, I see nods. Okay, I understood it right. Well done. Councillor Zarillo.
My question related to the availability already of water service or city service on this lot. Is there any city roads, water, or sewer already available to these roads, or will that all be incremental cost to this rezone?
Through your worship to Councillor Zarillo, yes, there is some servicing requirements if this goes through, if it's approved by council, one of which is getting sanitary service extended north up Rocklin into the subdivision.
Now, the Mayor just pointed out some of the things we're getting on the positive side. Is there any chance for public hearing to understand what are the costs associated to servicing just this one site?
It's a subdivision, so it's not subject to a public hearing. Is there?
Oh, I thought we were doing a public hearing on this.
Yes, sir. There is a rezoning required.
There's a rezoning.
Yes, to make it consistent. So the zones that are allowed under the Pardon Creek land use designations.
Yeah, because I guess what I'm trying to understand is if this goes through public hearing and it happens to get approved, what is the burden on the taxpayer for sewer, water, all the stuff for this one site?
Your Worship, it's a good question. Let's take that away. We can provide some information in the public hearing brief, but in general, with the subdivision, it's part and parcel with the rezoning. The developer would be responsible for the on-site services and frontage works, roads and underground utilities and the like. In the neighborhood around, there'd be two different approaches. For the larger works we call trunk works, that would be through our development cost charge program, and other works would be then picked up by other adjoining lands, so everyone does their piece, so to speak, in extending the roads and services along. So, but we can look a little further into that, and we can give a little bit more information in the public hearing brief if you wish. Yeah,
that's great, and I hear what you're saying, but we just don't know how soon the other areas will be developed, and then do we carry the burden for many years, or does it pay for itself up front?
Again, they would be responsible for their on-site and frontage works. It couldn't really proceed as an island unto itself, because we wouldn't be able to issue, like for example, building permits for single family on smaller lots unless there's the sanitary sewer services there or the water system there capable of servicing that. So it would probably be something that would be happening in concert with the lands around.
And if I may, as I noted before, a key aspect of this development is getting that sanitary sewer service north up Rocklin and then west down that new road stub going west. And that's actually going to set up the future development of the properties to the west that are along Mitchell Street. So that's a key aspect that this development will be bringing forward. And like Jim said, that development needs to pay for itself in terms of servicing, and yeah, we can definitely outline the servicing requirements as part of the public hearing brief.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Motion is first reading and a public hearing. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
The next item, item 9, is the development permit amendment authorization for a grocery store at 1033 Austin Avenue.
Finally.
Staff recommendation that council approve the signing and sealing of the development amendment permit for 1033 Austin Avenue, and the mayor and city clerk be authorized to execute it.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Councillor Asmundson, seconded by Councillor Cirillo. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. I was looking on the colored rooftop thing for the elevator and couldn't find it, but I find it on the other, the more detailed roof site plan. So there is an elevator that goes from the rooftop parking down into the store, the main level, I would assume. Does it go down to the bottom? Like, is it an elevator that will go from the very bottom? Yes, Carl?
Sorry. Through your worship, the Councillor Reid, yes, there will be an elevator going through the building from the top to the bottom.
Top to bottom.
Yeah, that's
okay.
correct.
So right now we've got 37 extra spots, right?
Yes, I counted my calculations. Yeah, it was between 40 and 45 extra spots. Yeah.
What I was going by your numbers, I think it was.
Sure.
Whatever it is, I thought it was 37.
It's overparked. Yeah.
Any event, when I'm finding it curious that they're not ready to build now while they've got equipment there to build the Safeway store, why they're not popping one building into the ground as well. Do we know why? It's just their choice of timing?
Yes, choice of timing.
Okay. And so have you assured yourselves that on each of these two lots, that two additional sites that they could pop a building onto, that there's going to be adequate parking?
Yes, we've had a number of discussions with the applicant on the developability of those two sites, and they can be viably developed. And the architect, the applicant, would have to prove out the viability of the parking as part of that, according to the bylaw.
Okay, so on Ridgeway, I won't be relying on any street parking, correct, for this development?
Everything will have to be parked on site.
Pardon?
Everything with the new development would have to be parked on site as per our bylaw.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Cirillo.
I had two questions. First of all, I echo what the mayor said. I'm really happy to see this coming. It's going to be wonderful, and I will be shopping there. Wanted to ask about the setbacks to zero. Just some reasoning behind how the setbacks go from 7.6, I think, to zero.
Yes, good question. Through your worship, the Councillor Cirillo, the existing zone on the site C2 allows a grocery store, and it really is a zone that supports commercial plaza development, the sort of traditional suburban type of development where you have the store frontage and entrances set back from the street with a parking lot in between. So that's hence the 7.6 meters minimum setback. But this is a unique store design and has a much more pedestrian-friendly urban design to it, where the store is on top of the surface lot and has frontage and small retail units coming out to the street. So that's the rationale behind the variance, and in fact the weather protection that comes out from the building faces on both sides, that's what that variance is supporting as well.
And so the sidewalks are relative, it's not reducing the width of the sidewalk?
No, actually the sidewalks on Austin are going to be quite substantial, 5.5 meters in some sections, 3.5 to 4 meters. We took a really close look at the streetscape along Austin and Ridgeway to make sure that it is conducive to a pedestrian-friendly environment. It's going to be quite a transformation for this stretch of Austin, and we wanted to make sure that we got it right, and the applicant and the staff worked together for a good solution there.
That's wonderful. One last question. You talked about the parking that will be on the roof. I'm not sure if this is something that can be even under our control, but is Safeway willing to share the parking on the rooftop there? So if we end up, if you wanted to walk across the street to a restaurant or you wanted to nip into the bakery, or are they willing to share the parking with other businesses?
No.
I'm sorry.
Yes, Your Worship, we'll have the applicant come to the podium here. And
If council would like.
Let us know.
The applicant's apparently ready, and I hear nodding. I don't hear nodding, but I see nodding. Your name and address for the record at this microphone here.
It's Kevin Sharp, and my address is 3844 Regent Avenue, North Vancouver, and I work for the applicant for Safeway. The parking ratio there, given that we're parking for a grocery store, likely wouldn't allow for additional parkers from around the neighborhood to park there. However, I highly doubt that it's going to be very regulated with respect to a company coming by and checking who's parking there, and it would be very difficult to regulate. So the parking there will not only be for the parking for the grocery store. There's going to be 4 CRU units there as well, and that parking will be for those units as well, for those retail units.
Thank you. Yeah, what's there now? Right there is a 2-hour limit?
In where?
At the Safeway, beside.
It's whatever the applicant wants. I don't think there is is there a parking time limit on?
Yeah, I do believe it's 2 hours.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it'll probably be the same.
Yeah, I would imagine so.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I like this design. I like the increase in shopping area going from 21 to 57,000. So it's quite an increase in area of shopping on the street. I like the design. The one only concern I have is about the public's perception about the west side of it with the grass parked area, and making sure that people understand that this isn't going to be a permanent grass parked area, that when it does come for future development, that we don't wind up with a public perception problem. Because people like their green spaces, and they see this developed as maybe as a permanent green space. So just a developer to make sure there's some signage that this is not a permanent amenity. I like the design. I think we've been waiting. Mayor Stewart, there's been a number of years we've had discussions about the Safeway redevelopment, and I'm glad it's here. I like the design. I like it out to the street. I think that's the way we want to see things today, and so I'm very pleased to see this here. Thank you.
Yep. Councillor Wilson.
I was very excited to see this, and but I didn't really like the design at first, because the frontage on Austin just seemed to be such a monolithic building, and so I had a long discussion with Mr. McIntyre and Mr. Johansson, and they assured me that they did everything they could to try to make it as vibrant and engaging as possible. And because of the site limitations and the way the escalators have to go and everything, and the store layout, everything was done that could be done to try to make the frontage less I keep using the word monolithic. I don't want to use the word monolithic, but the whole, modern design guidelines are you want if it's a large store like that, you want there to make it seem like there's a bunch of little stores and make it more articulated and more variety. And so I just wanted to assure council that they did everything they could to try to make that happen. So I'm after that discussion, I was feeling much better about the whole project. So I let you guys know that they're working hard on our behalf. Thank you.
And Councillor Morrison.
Thank you. I was very happy to see the design on this. The fact that it's bringing it to the street, I think, is tremendous, as we try to look at Austin Heights as one of the really few areas on the south area of Coquitlam that we can have a true walking district, and bringing this to the street really helps enable that. So I really hope when we look down just to the west of the Beatty Tower, close to the street, this one here, I think it's a great piece, and hopefully it serves as an example of what others can do and really recognize what can happen in the Austin Heights corridor, and really help with the revitalization. So I'm very happy to see this one come forward, and I'll be supporting it.
Thank you. I'm pleased with the assembly. Finally, I know we talked about this starting about a number of years ago, and this is a better solution. Although I'm still left with questions as to how they would stage the development on the remaining site, but that's not for the purpose of today. The purpose of today is this the right land use? Is this the right project for this site? And does it deserve a development permit? I am enthusiastically in favor of such. I will support that. Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, thank you very much. Very quickly, in terms of the streetscape here, it's very attractive. And I see on, I guess it's attachment 5, the store elevations, the Austin Avenue frontage and the Main Street. And I heard earlier that the sidewalk can be up to 5 meters wide in some areas. I don't see any provision for any sort of benches here or there along this long stretch or things like that. And I thought this was a big part of what we wanted to do Millardville and along Austin as well. I wonder, Mr. Chair, if anybody on staff would have any answer to that question.
I do. Got their heads down. Mr. Johansson.
Through your worship to Councillor O'Neill. Yes, excellent question. In addition to the wide sidewalk, street trees, attachment 5, the street trees aren't shown in some sections to show the building facade, but there will be street trees there. There also will be provision for benches. It's adhering to the Austin Heights streetscape guidelines, which really raise the bar in terms of pedestrian quality and environment. And when we do the development servicing stage of the development permit, we'll be watching closely to make sure that we have those amenities on the sidewalk area.
That's good, because we talk about making all these new urban areas so much more people-friendly. And response to something Councillor Wilson was saying, in terms of the big glass front, it's certainly, if that's all there was going to be, and just a few trees that show up here, that would have been maybe not living up to what we had intended. So I'm glad to hear from Mr. Johansson that there will be benches and other things like that to make this very people-friendly. Thank you.
Your Worship, I'm sorry if I just on that, and I learned this morning from our meeting with Councillor Wilson and Carl, whose team has been really working hard with the applicant on it. There's actually more street trees than are shown in the elevations. They don't want to obscure the building, so if you look at the landscaping plan, there's actually more trees along that stretch to provide that buffering effect.
Thank you.
Attachment 3 in the package actually shows the street trees and benches, and the applicants also put forward an entry plaza on the southwest corner of the site, which ramps down to the sidewalk and also provides some seating opportunities, informal seating opportunities with good sun exposure. Could become a nice urban spot.
That's it for you? Okay. Question is a development permit. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries unanimously, and that would appear to be the beginning of the end of one of the last remaining, as they're sometimes called, marine arch buildings, the gull wing building, the different type of architecture that was iconic. Actually, I'm just using my quiz night information. Of course, the library had a trivia night, and that was pretty darn trivial. And we got that one right. Our team, the City Council team in green, got that one right. So that's all I have on that one.
Well, we'll move to the next item then.
Yes.
Item 10 is the proposed road cancellation application adjacent to city-owned property in the 1300 block of Marigold Street in northeast Coquitlam. This is bylaw number 4554. Staff recommendations to council give first, second, and third readings.
Wait for a minute, please. Go ahead. Sorry, they started moving it while you paused.
Okay.
There's a level of enthusiasm here we haven't seen in weeks.
So we got the mover.
Staff recommendations to council give first, second, and third readings to City of Coquitlam Highway Dedication Cancellation Bylaw number 4554, and that Bylaw number 4554 be advertised in accordance with the Charter.
Second.
Moved for the second time, Councillor Zerillo, seconded by Councillor Asmussen.
Second.
Okay, now we're done. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 11 is the QNet 2015 AGM report. Staff recommendation that Council, as the QNet shareholder, approve the Coquitlam Optical Network Corporation 2014 annual report, including the audited financial statements, which are attachment A. Appoint Peter Steblin, John Dumont, Joseph Diaz-Jaggi, Jim McIntyre, Mark Zaborniak, David Monroe, and Jay Gilbert to serve on the QNet Board of Directors until the next annual general meeting of QNet. 3, appoint the same financial auditor of QNet as will be used to conduct the financial audit of the city for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2015. I would note that consideration of these items fulfills the annual general meeting requirements of the company for 2015.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Aspenson, seconded by Councillor Zarrillo. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Just leave that other one out there. Item 12 is the terms of reference and citizen appointments to the Economic Development Advisory Committee. Staff recommendations that Council approve the terms of reference and the citizen appointments to the Economic Development Advisory Committee as set out in attachments 1 and 2 of the report before you.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Marsden, seconded by Councillor Hodge. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Your Worship, that's the last formal item on this agenda.
Second.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, seconded by Councillor Asmundson to be unanimous for the whole night. All in favor? Opposed? You can't vote against it, Councillor O'Neill. You moved it. The motion carries unanimously. Now, I have a few questions, but I'm not allowed to ask them here. This is a public question period. Are there any questions for the audience on any items of tonight's agenda? Really, anyone in aggregate that has any questions? Any gravelly voices out there?
Nope.
Seeing none, thank you all for coming.
You're trying to encourage me?